As the year comes to a close, the number of homicides are down, but people are not feeling safer.
How can you feel safe? You're just trading one poison for another. So no, it's not a safe place to live.
From car thefts and carjackings.
This is the fourth time our car has been either vandalized, broke into, or stolen. I've been here for 5 years, but I can't live like this. I haven't slept since that day.
To the juvenile crime crisis.
The one said, give me your keys, and I have the keys in my hand like this. Hit me on the head.
The problems facing Baltimore don't seem to be going away anytime soon.
People are scared to come out of their home in the middle of broad daylight. That is insane.
Tonight, we're searching for solutions. This is your voice.
What could we do united to, hopefully fix the problems that we're suffering together?
Your future.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for this City in Crisis, Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. I'm Mackenzie Frost. Tonight, we're going to talk about all things public safety in Baltimore City. Let's get right to our panelists this evening. First, we have former mayor and current mayoral candidate Sheila Dixon, the councilman for District 11, where we are, Eric Costello, the public safety chair for the Federal Hill Neighborhood Association, Brad O'Brien, and Jeff Dewberry, the Riverside Neighborhood Association, with the Riverside Neighborhood Association. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We also invited Mayor Brandon Scott to participate in this discussion this evening, but we did not hear back from his office. Public safety remains one of the biggest issues for many voters across the city and constituents almost anywhere in the state. Former Mayor Sheila Dixon, let's start with you and talk about what are you hearing as you campaign across the city? What are you hearing from voters about their biggest concerns when it comes to crime, public safety, and the juvenile violence that we're seeing?
So, because I lost my voice, I'm gonna be succinct. People don't feel safe. The quality of their neighborhoods not feeling safe. The juvenile crime, the carjackings, the car thefts, all types of quality of life issues that impact everybody. And people want to see the presence of police in their neighborhood so that they can feel safe and that they know that they have protection. And we've got to do better. We're not doing well at that at all. And I just strongly believe that the only way we retain citizens here is by having police engage and involved. Their presence makes a difference because people should feel safe in their neighborhoods.
Councilman Costello, let's go to you because I want to talk to you about a town hall that took place earlier in this week. You were at a different event listening to what people are saying, hearing from the Department of Juvenile Services, the state's attorney's office, lawmakers. What are you seeing in terms of the biggest problems and frustrations that you're hearing from people in the city?
There's a lot of frustration across the community, whether it's in South Baltimore or West Baltimore, around crime. Violent crime obviously is at the top of the list, but when we look at issues like car thefts, we're approaching 10,000 this year alone. And I think there's a lot of frustration around that, and there's a lot of frustration around the extent to which we're holding individuals accountable for that. And the forum that Senate President Bill Ferguson and delegates Clippinger and Edelson hosted on Monday evening really tried to focus on that issue and the work that the Department of Juvenile Services and the Police Department and State's Attorney Office is doing. And unfortunately, from what I heard and what I heard from many of the folks who attended, there's a lot of concerns about the extent to which they're working together effectively, specifically Department of Juvenile Services. So when we talk about things that need to change to improve the climate, to make our community safer, I think it starts with those executive branch agencies working together more effectively. And in my mind, that starts with Department of Juvenile Services and with BPD and the SAO.
Jeff, when it comes to your neighborhood, what are you hearing from your neighbors and what you're seeing in terms of crime?
Yeah, in terms of crime, our neighbors are very concerned about crime in the city. We hear it all the time, folks wanting to leave the city because of crime. The one thing I will say for the Peninsula area, it is a very safe place. But at the end of the day, we need to figure out, number one, to give Baltimore City Police the investigative tools to be able to catch criminals when they come into the neighborhood, commit the crime, find them quickly, apprehend them quickly, and then build a strong case for the state's attorney's office to be able to prosecute those folks.
And I know the Riverside community recently announced some license plate readers.
Yes, we did announce. We have. It's been a combination of the community associations throughout South Baltimore. Brad was instrumental in that to get the license plate readers up and doing that, and that's just helping BPD be a force and us to be a force multiplier for them. As we know, Baltimore City Police is short 500 to 600 officers. We're trying to help them by do that, and it's not just a BPD problem being of officer shortage. It's a problem that is occurring throughout the country in police departments. And how can we, as neighborhood associations, help Baltimore City Police, number one, catch those criminals faster and get them off the streets?
Brad, what was the process like going about working with other neighborhood associations, working together to try and bring tools like this forward? Was the relationship with the city, was it with BPD specifically, or how did you go about getting that?
Yeah, so it really began with us learning about what the state of Maryland Department of Housing Community Development was offering and the Community Safety Works grant cycle. And so I think there was about $30 million towards public safety issues that was in different waves of like $10 million. And so once we realized that that was accessible, we had a great relationship with the Assistant Secretary, Carol Gilbert, and learning about the process and what we needed to do. And the relationships were already there. The Peninsula is a pretty small geographic area. There are a lot of neighborhood associations, community groups, but the relationships are there. And so for us to go to a group like Federal Home Main Street or Riverside Neighborhood Association or the South Baltimore Neighborhood Association, those relationships were there. And we realized that if we worked together, we could benefit the broader peninsula, not just our neighborhood associations. And so we were able to secure about $200,000 in the first two cycles that covered things like the LPRs, but also pedestrian safety. It's a huge issue for our neighbors here to do a placemaking right-of-way mural at Light Street and Warren Avenue, get more lighting in Federal Hill Park so people felt safe when they're out walking. But it really had the relationship of neighbors who were already engaged and active in public safety issues that really made that possible.
You bring up making sure that residents or community members feel safe in their neighborhoods, and we're seeing that kind of people continue to say that they don't feel safe in their own communities, but we look at the homicide and the non-fatal shooting numbers and they're down compared to this time last year. Councilman Costello, where do you think the disconnect is and what can be done to ensure people actually feel safe?
Well, homicides being down, that's the most important statistic we can have. We're talking about loss of human life. But there are a number of other crimes that are tracked by BPD, many of which are not down. And that includes car thefts, for example. Again, we're closing in on 10,000 car thefts this year alone. If you do the math, 585,000 people in the city of Baltimore, that's 1 in every 58 people has had a car stolen. That's at least one person in this room, if not more. And it's really unfortunate that we've gotten to this point before we've been able to take action to address that issue.
I looked at the numbers from BPD today. A new incident report was published today. So as of December 16th, there have been 10,766 cars stolen in Baltimore City this year. That's a 215% increase.
But if you look at past years, when car theft was down, when we saw that it was increasing, we should have been on top of it, been proactive to figure out whether or not it was TikTok where young people were stealing cars, or was it individuals at the port where they're being shipped overseas? And people have not been proactive. You've got to look at all the different systems to figure it out, and you got to work with all the partners to make that happen. And I think the example that he used where communities came together, we got to take best practices in some neighborhoods and then share with other neighborhoods. Like my neighborhood, Hunting Ridge, we've had an increase of quality of life crimes. We brought Park Heights Citizens on Patrol to meet with us so that we could reestablish our citizens on patrol. And that's what's going to take, along with the police department, the sheriff's department, the school police. You know, we've got to utilize all these resources in order to maximize the shortage of Baltimore City Police as well.
I know that when we often hear statistics from the mayor, he touts carjackings are down compared to this time last year, but car thefts, as we know, continue to rise. Councilman Costello, do you think that that's is the mayor trying to, I guess, shield the reality of what's happening by talking about carjackings instead of talking about the reality of car thefts?
I can't speak for the current mayor, but what I will say is that is mincing words. The bottom line is that people do not feel safe. So a hard stop, that's the most important thing. People need to feel safe in the communities that they work in and that they live in. And people don't feel safe right now because we've had over 10,000 car thefts. The fact that we have raised the flag on this issue several times this year and gotten to the point where we went over 2 months without having club devices to issue to citizens. This is a device that is $25 that you can purchase on Amazon. And we went over 2 months without having them. There is absolutely no scenario in which that is acceptable. We need to act with a sense of urgency that our community leaders are acting with, because they're hearing from our neighbors every single day. Elected officials are hearing from our neighbors every single day. We have to act with a sense of urgency.
When it comes to making sure that the city and the state really is on top of this issue, looking at the other partners, the Department of Juvenile Services is brought up time and time again. We've heard so many stories from families, parents of a juvenile who has begged DJS to make sure that their child is held accountable. They feel like there's nothing left for them to do. They don't know where else to go. Is the intake process something that needs to be revisited and reevaluated? I know, Councilman, you talked about the intake process not too long ago with DJS. When it comes to that, have you gotten any updates from DJS on how they're managing that?
No, I haven't. We had a hearing about a month and a half ago, and DJS explained the process to us. And in short, when a juvenile is apprehended by BPD, they are taken to the Baltimore Juvenile Detention Center. They await paperwork to be filed. And in short, what was happening was BPD, an arresting officer, would bring a juvenile in, and then they would get on the phone with someone from Department of Juvenile Services who's not physically present, who would make a determination without seeing all of the paperwork to determine whether or not that young person should be let back out. So let's talk about who has been wronged in this whole scenario. There is a victim who has been carjacked or has had their car stolen. There is a community that is concerned about that happening in their neighborhood. And just as importantly, there is a young person. There is an opportunity for diversion, and that wasn't happening because of that intake process. So we were assured that within a week, Department of Juvenile Services would change that intake process to have someone present 24/7, 365. We were promised a written response. We didn't receive one. I've been in touch with our state legislators about that. As you all know, DJS is a state agency, but I'm confident that we have some of the best state legislators in the state of Maryland representing Baltimore City, and especially here in the 46th district. And I know that they're going to be looking at any and all measures that they can enact to ensure that our communities are safer.
I know that DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi has been on the job for about 10 months, almost a year now. Given all of the issues that we continue to hear about within DJS and the frustrations and the policy discussions and debates, do you believe that Secretary Schiraldi is the right person for this job?
I don't interact with DJS. That's a question that's better suited to the Maryland state senators or delegates. What I know is that folks do not feel safe. There's an expectation that government do everything it can to protect people. And I think everyone's expectation is that will happen.
Ms. Dixon, what do you think about the secretary?
I just believe that based on his philosophy and what's going on legislatively, that people need to come to the table. State's attorney, the legislators, the Department of Juvenile Justice, they need to be at the table to figure out what's the best plan. Let's look at all the nonprofits that are now dealing with young people. Which ones are really working effectively, and how can we maximize it? What's going on in the family? That parent or guardian needs to be at the table, you know, so because you can't keep going back and forth and criticizing that the legislators or what he's doing. But folks got to sit down and come up with an overall strategy. We have to look at what's happening in schools. I talked to somebody the other day who does truancy, and he said that they go out and track and they guarantee that that child that's truant is also the one that's in trouble. So schools, parents, Department of Juvenile Services, and looking at the legislation.
If you were,
I apologize. I feel good, but in the process, I lost my voice.
And one thing, Mackenzie, one thing to add to what former Mayor Dixon said, you know, once upon a time we had an effective Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and that was a group that was convened. And that has occurred in the past. It occurred when Mayor Dixon was in office. It occurred when Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake was in office. And that's where everyone was brought to the table. The state's attorney, the U.S. attorney, the Baltimore Police Department, state police, the judges. We have to have the judges in the room, Department of Juvenile Services, Department of Corrections at the state level, parole and probation, Sheriff's Department. All of those folks need to be at the table, and we had that once upon a time. Again, when Mayor Dixon was in office, when Mayor Rawlings-Blake was in office, and that's something that we need to return to, because if everyone is not in the room, as she indicated, and they're not talking, these problems are not going to get solved.
I believe former Governor Larry Hogan, there was the funding, he cut the funding for the coordinating council, and I believe it is restarting, or the plans were that it was going to restart. I'm not sure if that actually happened or not, but when you brought up the working together and the communication, and I think that that was clearly on display, the lack of communication that we saw earlier this week in the previous town hall between the state's attorney's office and DJS, especially when it comes to data and what's really happening with the young people. Brad, I see you nodding your head there. I want to ask you, as a community member and a leader, are you hearing people talk about some of the same kids that they're seeing committing crimes and coming back out into the community?
Yeah, so I think, you know, one of the things for me, not just being a resident of Federal Hill and part of the public safety team there, but also the president of the Southern District's Community Relations Council with BPD. The reason I took that position is I realize I'm from a resourced and privileged neighborhood. And being in a position in the whole Southern District allows me to learn from my neighbors that are in neighborhoods that have been under-resourced and marginalized and overlooked. And each month when we gather, we hear neighbors in Westport, Cherry Hill, Pigtown, Brooklyn, where they know their neighbors have been arrested. They know that they're on monitoring. They know, and you hear BPD saying it, we've arrested this young person 10 times, 15 times. And as a parent, you know, I got 4 kids, my wife and I are raising the kids in the city, choosing to do that. We love our school. We're blessed in many ways. You know, we're held accountable to pay taxes. We need leaders that are held accountable as well. And what we saw on Monday night is childish. It's childish. What could have been done is to say, my statistics are different than your statistics. I commit to meet with you in the next 5 business days so we can work together. But that did not happen, and that leaves us in the same position we were in before Monday night, which is a lot of people who are frustrated with a system that, as basic residents of the city, we know nothing about, because it's held back from us to know each step of the process. Something's broken. Somebody needs to stop pointing fingers, and they need to be held accountable.
What information do you want to know in terms of how DJS operates? What information would be beneficial to the community to know about this process?
Well, let's think about it like we have some great medical institutions here, right? If you're at one of our medical institutions and they have a patient that has a rare form of cancer, they're going to find a way within HIPAA to inform other doctors about their patient. Why can we not do something similar with the juvenile system? We can protect the young person's future and their identity, but we can talk about these things. I was happy to learn from one of the DJS employees that when one of the young people in their system is killed or accused or charged of that, they do convene a council, but a basic resident of the city knows nothing about that. We know nothing about what they learned when the young people were released in Southeast District. What did they learn? What do they fix? We're told that there are problems, we feel that there are problems, but no one tells us that they're learning, because they oftentimes take a perspective that they are the professional in the room and we just need to shut up. But my wife and I, we've fostered 6 kids. We've been the wraparound services for young people that were raised in traumatic households. And so we are doing our part. We need leaders that do their part as well.
Ms. Dixon, I want to ask you about the way things, I guess, under your administration worked when it comes to working with DJS, or at the state level, partnering from the city and the state, especially with the facility in Baltimore City. Do you think that that relationship needs to be strengthened to ensure that the communication is happening more effectively?
Yes, but also, is it actually happening now? We don't know that. Nobody's being transparent about it. People are saying they're meeting, but are they really meeting? And going back to the Criminal Coordinating Council, that's a public meeting where everybody's at the table and everybody's information is put out there, strengths and weaknesses. Okay, how are we going to, as a team, fix these issues and deal with the criticisms from each other, but do it openly and not without egos, but do it because we want to be effective leaders in how we project and resolve this, because we shouldn't be where we are today. 2014, I think on WBAL earlier today, radio, said there were like some number like 40 car thefts versus the numbers now. Come on.
Do you think that that's a failure of the current administration?
I think that it is a real challenge and that it is a failure.
Jeff, I want to talk about Riverside. I know that FOX45 has reported on several strings of robberies and car thefts and assaults that have happened. What's it like now compared to, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago?
You know, that's a great question. I don't have the statistics out in front of me. You know, we've had these things happen, especially in our area. It's a lot of transient crime where folks come into the area, the crime is committed, they leave, and you know, folks do have some hesitance. You know, going out at night, walking at night, and we want to ensure, you know, through the community associations that. You know, these things do happen. It's an urban area. It happens throughout the country. But we also want to make sure that, number one, that Baltimore City Police understand where this stuff is happening. Some things don't translate over from shift to shift. And we also want to help BPD be able to catch these folks when this transient crime comes into our area through the license plate readers, through increased city watch cameras, through increased just help. And you know, we're getting there with BPD, but the main thing is just that crossover. And I think it really just comes down to truly understanding, doing analysis and crime statistics and everything. I think that needs to happen a lot more. It can't just be Baltimore City Police going radio call to radio call to radio call. There needs to be some more comprehensive analysis of what's going on.
We have about a couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so, before the next General Assembly session. The House Judiciary Committee has had 3 meetings specifically talking about juvenile crime and ways to address some of the concerns that people in the community have raised. Councilman Costello, what do you want to see lawmakers tackle in January?
Look, it's a very complicated issue. There's a lot of moving pieces. You heard about all the different agencies that are involved in the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. I think the most important thing that can happen is that the legislature makes sure and holds the purse strings to ensure that these agencies are working together. That's what I think the root of the problem is. And the legislature obviously has an opportunity to deal with that. There's going to be tweaks to the law every single year to make it more effective, make it fair, ensure it's working for everyone and keeping communities safe. I have no doubt that there will be tweaks this year. I know our legislators have been out on tour at community meetings, at forums like this, talking to everyone to try and better understand what the issues are and where changes are necessary. And I'm confident those changes will happen this session.
When you talk about using the power of the purse strings, are you saying that DJS's budget should be reevaluated until policies and procedures are followed?
I'm saying using the power of the purse strings.
Ms. Dixon, what do you think about using the power of the purse strings, perhaps withholding funding or adjusting the budget for DJS until something changes?
Not being a part of the state system, I don't know if they can hold the fundings or not, but I think you have to make them accountable based on approving their budget, giving them timelines, making sure that they come back and report to the legislators, make sure that they're meeting with the governor, and to make sure that we are seeing real results to determine, the next steps.
And if that doesn't happen, what do lawmakers do?
Well, in the council, they have the opportunity to move money and to cut money. I think it's going to depend on what the state legislators. But I think there's enough people this year going down in January to want to make sure that they're being held accountable. And I'm not talking about locking up and changing laws to lock up young people, but they have to be held accountable. We've got to work with families. We can't just negate that at all. And the legislators have to realize that the citizens are crying out for results.
Brad, as a community member, and now perhaps on the brink of potential change to the juvenile justice laws, is it frustrating that the situation had to get to this point before it feels like lawmakers started to pay attention?
Yeah, I mean, being a resident of the 46th, we have some very powerful representatives, and that's very encouraging to know. They're also very responsive. They will listen, and I know that after Monday night that they heard. The letters that I've been copied on, there's no way that they can reconvene in Annapolis and not realize that things need to be addressed. What that looks like through the legislature, that's their job, not mine, but we will hold them accountable. It is frustrating when anyone who disagrees with what was passed as the Juvenile Justice Reform Act is cast in the light of wanting to lock young people up and forget about them. I think I've heard a lot of people talk about wanting to have compassionate accountability. We need the young person in mind, and we need the victim and the community that's been victimized in mind also. And so I'm encouraged by our representatives in the 46th because they listen, because they hear us, they respond to us, and I trust that they're going to do the right thing.
I want to bring up one example of a situation where we've been reporting on an 18-year-old, Tristan Jackson. He is accused of being involved in the Brooklyn Day mass shooting. He's facing attempted homicide charges, dozens of other gun charges as well. We reported that he potentially is going to be sent back to DJS, even though he is 18 and being held in a juvenile facility. Do you think that that's acceptable, Ms. Dixon?
No, I don't think it's acceptable. But early on, before he turned 18, obviously he was involved in activities.
He was 18 at the time.
Right, but I'm saying, I think that we need to look at what's going on in that household. What are his guardians and parents doing? What role and responsibility do they have to be a part of it? If they've attempted to get assistance to help him, where did the breakdown come from? Mm-hmm. And then what are we going to do if he is accountable and put in the juvenile system? How are we going to track and get him the kind of support and services that he needs in order to become an individual who can become productive? Because, young people in the city, they're the next generation to take the city to the next level. And we need everybody to be a part of that process. And so everybody's born in this world the same, despite, our differences economically. But the breakdown, and that's why I keep going back to the schools and parents and the resources that are needed. I mean, I grew up here, and so with 1 million people. And so to see what's happening now, it just hurts my heart. And so that's why I decided to get back out of here, roll up my sleeves, and do everything in my power to try to help change this for the next generation, because we've got to make a difference.
Councilman Costello, briefly, before we open it up to questions, I want to ask you about a situation at Dunbar, where we had a situation at Carver yesterday. Today, Dunbar, we had one student who was found with 3 guns. What can be done about students who are carrying weapons in school? What needs to happen?
Who's here? Who are you asking?
Councilman Costello, sorry.
I read that on the news a couple hours ago about the incident at Dunbar. It's extremely concerning. Read the letter that leadership at North Avenue sent out to parents, and I certainly, if I had a child at that school, I wouldn't really feel comfortable right now. That's a big problem. And I think there's a number of things that city schools could be doing in closer coordination with law enforcement outside of the school, along with city schools police. City schools has their own police force. I don't know all the specifics around that situation, but I think my reaction to that is the same as everyone's. It's extremely concerning, and it's not something that can happen. Just as important as it is to have heat and air conditioning in our schools and make sure that our kids are fed so that they can stay focused throughout the day, they need to feel safe. They need to be certain that someone in school does not have a weapon so that they can be relaxed and focused and learn, because that's what they're there for.
I just wanted to add that I met with a business who has security systems, and he's been working with schools, I believe in Frederick, I can't remember the counties, where they can detect if a gun is broken down, if it's a ghost gun or any kind of weapon. They've been talking to Baltimore City. Of course, Baltimore City schools have not responded. They did a test pilot in PG County. The kids felt safe. I mean, we've got to be aggressive in providing systems within the schools so that kids can get in there, and those that are carrying weapons, no matter how they're coming in, not when they're late, but having it there that they have to go by every day. And I believe we got to do that for all of our schools, particularly our high schools, because what happened at Carver should not have happened based on what just happened 2 weeks ago.
Panelists, thank you very much. Thank you to our viewers at home for joining us. It has been another Your Voice, Your Future City in Crisis Town Hall. Have a great evening. We're going to take a quick break for our viewers at home and open it up to questions. Before we get to the questions, while people are lining up, I wanted to address something this morning. One second, sorry. You can join the line. That's how we're doing it. Yep. All right, welcome back. We're going to start with some audience member questions for our panel. But before we get to that, Ms. Dixon, I want to address something. This morning on Fox 45 Morning News, there was an incident during your interview. I wanted to make sure if everything was okay with you and if you could respond.
Yeah, no, everything is okay. I'm human. People are in pain. This is a holiday. People are stressed. You know, we have challenges in your family, in your partnership, in your relationships. And sometimes people don't know how to express their stress. So I'm fine.
Okay, just want to make sure you're good?
I'm good.
Everyone's good. Okay, great. All right, so let's start with our first question. If you can just come right up here, I'll hold the mic, and please make sure that the question is succinct as much as possible.
30 seconds.
This is old.
I get 30 seconds to answer this question.
Okay.
This is Mackenzie Frost. Excuse me. Okay. I got 30 seconds to ask my question. My question is, why should we trust you as mayor after you was convicted or pleaded guilty to a crime? You know what I'm saying? There ain't no get it out of here. You know what I'm saying? Plus, ain't you the mayor to close the rec centers, to cut the juveniles out? No. I've been knowing you since 1997. No, let me ask my question. Ask I ask. All right?
You have two questions.
No. I'm an activist in Baltimore. I'm a member of Out for Justice in Baltimore. That's an ex-felon organization. We're not gonna lock up our kids. Y'all going after these juveniles like y'all went after them squeegee kids in Maryland Mosby. That ain't gonna happen. When you go to Annapolis, y'all gotta answer to the voters. It ain't just y'all. And FOX45 ain't gonna be the voice of the community, because we got other people in this community with voices. You can put me out, you can shut me down. Mog, you know where I am. I'm gonna be here all the time.
All right,
my question is, what y'all gonna do about holding the politicians accountable for corruption?